I've been wanting to see the Aurora Borealis for so many years, and supposedly 2024 is the year to do it. It's the best it's going to be in like 30 years or something like that. So I spent way too much money and tons of time on airplanes to go all the way up to the Arctic Circle and see what it's all about. In exploring that region of the world and chasing the lights, I got to learn a really cool life lesson, and I was reminded of an important aspect of our psychology. So stick around because we'll get to that in a bit. So the night that we're chasing the lights, it truly was a chase. I felt like I was a ghost hunter on that show where they're going in all these places trying to track down a certain spirit or something like that. It was a wild goose chase. I mean, we get in the car and it's double-digit negative temperatures. It's freezing cold, the coldest weather I've ever been in my life. It is snowing so hard you can't even see out the car. There's crazy conditions, right? And our guide that was helping me and my friends find this thing was telling us all this information about the Aurora Borealis. She was saying, we need to get away from the cities. We need to get away from all the light pollution, and we need to have perfectly clear weather. So they were communicating with weather stations. They were talking with other tours. There was all sorts of science going on in the car as we were driving through. She had all these charts and graphs, and she's hopping on phone calls and walkie-talkies and, did you find this or did you find that? And my friends and I were just so fascinated with everything happening around us to even get to find the lights. So we ended up driving around for probably 7 or so hours minimum, all through the night in the pitch black, super crazy snowstorms, stopping at these various areas to see, is there any light activity at all? And the guide had warned us. She said, it's actually not what you expect, because so many people think that, like on Instagram or YouTube, wherever you see pictures or videos of the lights, that it's going to look like that with your naked eye. Well, it's not really like that all the time. Our eyes can only pick up a certain spectrum of light. So we have cameras and special equipment to actually see the different rays of light, depending on how strong the solar activity is. So she was explaining us all the science and walking us through some of the cool aspects of chasing it down. And we finally ended up at this one stop. We get out, and I'm just smacked in the face by the coldest, most painful weather I've ever experienced. This frigid Arctic snowstorm. And it's clearing pretty quickly. We're getting really, really clear skies. We're super far away from the city. We ended up even driving from Norway into Finland. And we're outside in the middle of nowhere just looking around, and they have all their equipment out and they're looking around ferociously. And then finally they look up and point. She says, look, the lights, there they are. And we all turn in amazement, and we're like, what? What are you talking about? There's like a black cloud in the sky. There's nothing there. And this is where I was hit with this incredible lesson. I thought so much about the Aurora Borealis. I had so many expectations. And because I couldn't see it with my naked eye, initially I was saying, oh, okay, well, it's not there. It doesn't exist. This isn't real. And we were super confused because she didn't explain anything for a bit. But then she goes on to say, this is what I meant by, like, you can't see it with your naked eye sometimes. The solar activity has to be very powerful. And we'd be very lucky tonight to be able to see it with our naked eyes. Turns out, after many more hours of driving and spot checking, we ended up seeing it with our naked eyes. I actually got to see the greens and the blues and some purples. And it was just the most magical, unbelievable thing I've ever seen. It was so strange in so many different ways. And I could make tons of videos on that alone, on all the things that it made me feel and how I experienced it and just how cool and unique and different it is, right? It's such a awesome bucket list thing to check off. But on the car ride home, after we got to see the lights and take our photos and do all the things, I was reflecting on this and I realized, okay, the same way that I thought all these things about the Aurora In the same way that I didn't see it thinking, oh, well, it's not there. I'm literally looking at the thing you're pointing at, but it's not there until I held up my phone. And now all of a sudden my camera's picking up all the greens and the blues and everything. I'm like, this is crazy. I didn't know that it was actually like this, and that sometimes you can't see it with your eyes. And the important life lesson here, and the important psychological takeaway, is that just because you can't see something, it doesn't mean it's not real. Just because you can't see an emotion, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because I can't experience someone else's emotion, it doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think this is a really, really important thing that a lot of people miss in relationships, especially where maybe their partner's feeling something, but because it isn't a giant mark on their forehead or a stain on their shirt, you don't physically see it. You don't physically see the emotion in their brain and the little wirings and all that stuff. You see the behaviors as a result of that emotion, but you don't always see the emotion. And sometimes people bottle that up and keep it locked within themselves. And so I think the huge takeaway for me there was we need to be careful on how we perceive situations. And we need to be careful that just because we don't see someone going through something, it doesn't mean they're not going through something. And the opposite can also exist, right? On the good side of things, just because we don't see someone being happy or excited or whatever about something cool, interesting, exciting in their life, it doesn't mean they don't feel that way. And because we think it ought to be a certain way and it ought to look a certain way, doesn't mean it always needs to. So I hope this was an interesting story for you. I hope this was a different lens to look at this stuff, because just as we were trying to look at the aurora with our naked eyes, we couldn't see it until we put a different lens over our eyes, until we looked through the cameras, until we had to experience complete darkness and have our eyes adjust. And only then could we see the aurora. I think the same is true with these things that I was mentioning about psychology. Sometimes we have to give it time. We have to look at things through a different lens. We have to tackle situations from a different way and look at it differently. And only then can we really see what's there. Perception is reality. And sometimes it's really not what you think it is. So please be careful with that. And I hope this was valuable for you. So keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, and hopefully you'll experience some very cool magic like I did that night that I got to see the aurora. Remember to take care of yourselves. Remember to take care of those around you. And for all things psychology to help you think, feel, and perform better, stay tuned right here on Psychology of Living.